right, so while my ColorLogic system has a ton of different options, one of the fastest ways you can build a look is simply by choosing various actions that have different sort of color themes and stacking them real quick. You don't even have to go into micro detail yet if you don't want to. And this is going to be a quick demo on how to stack. Now, a couple of caveats. Because these are actions, they give you a ton of flexibility, but because they're actions, there's a couple of guidelines you should know about when you want to stack freely and quickly. I'm going to go over them with you right now. So if you are not in actions button mode, definitely click the top right of the actions palette and choose button mode. This is going to allow you to see it with these color themes. Okay. Now, my understanding is some of these emojis, these circles and graphics and everything else don't show up on some systems, especially on Windows, but at least they are color coded. So you can kind of see the general idea of the color that they're based off. It's very difficult to say that if you push a green one, you're going to get green because it depends on your base image, right? This is shifting RGB curves around, which is amazing for nice smooth transitions across your grade. But you know, you're dealing with the base image. So this is a general idea of the base color, and that's why I have them color coded. But here's the deal. If you're on button mode and they're ready to go, you can pick any image. Let's go to this one here, kind of bring it to the forefront. And then now, let's assume we've done all our edits and we're on color grading, or we're pretty close to our edit. We've done our skin cleanup work and whatever other modifications we want. Now we're ready to color grade. Well, we can just start exploring. We think to ourselves, maybe some bluish tones. I don't know. I got a bunch down here. Let's just click one. How about fade out? We click that and we get a look. Now, just to remind you, inside every folder, there's a series of layers. And depending on which one you pick, there could be different layers in there. One of them includes, of course, the RGB curves. But here's the rule I want to tell you about. If you want the stacking to be quick and convenient and smooth, close these folders before you pick another one. So let's come over here and go to Frame. Okay, cool. It immediately stacks it on top. Photoshop, especially depending on the build and the version and what layer you might be clicked on, will get a little bit confused and stack these things messy if you leave the folders open. It's just a good idea to leave them closed whenever you want to start stacking and moving. So let's see, we turn that one off. Frame has a little bit of a cool tone. We have fade out underneath it. Okay, I kind of like where that's going, but maybe let's say I don't. I just simply delete that one. Let's hit MVP clarity. Ooh, that's a real strong look. Okay, I kind of like where that's going. If I turn off the one below it, it doesn't get quite as hazy. All right, let's open up clarity, see what's inside. If we go to the RGB, we see it's pretty strong. Now you can come in here and modify the RGB layers if you feel, the RGB channels, if you feel like you want to, and curves. But you can also take that colorizer, if you will, that curves layer, and change the opacity. So there's like a 50%. Okay, I'm gonna close that out, and we have that kind of color. I don't mind that kind of a blue tone. Now, what if we get bold and just throw some color that's not in that palette above it? How about something here, NBP Ignite? What does that do? Oh, now we're in the purple range. I can take the entire folder and maybe reduce the opacity of it. Something like that, maybe a 40%. Okay, let's see what we got from there to there. That's looking kind of nice. Okay, I kind of like that. And then we have helper actions on top, right? And these here, there's a few different things we can do with them. So for example, we have something here called Shadow Crusher. Let me open this a little wider so we can read it. Okay, we have shadow crushers, we have shadow softeners, we have highlight poppers. And let me explain how those work, because if you leave everything in button mode and just work with layers like this, you can get looks very, very quickly, right? So let's say I go to highlight popper medium. I tap it and now my highlights are popping off and on. You see that? And what it is the curves to minimize any type of clipping possibility, right? And it's set up to a blend if mode. So even though it's set up to a medium intensity on the highlight popping, see that? You can also double click the blend if and change the range if you want. More or less, etc. Leave it somewhere in the middle. And of course, the curve itself can be quickly modified, or you can go to opacity. So I'm going to make it like a 50% opacity. And there's a little bit of a curve pop. I think that's kind of cool. And on top of that, I have, let's see, I have a compressor. How about a compressed medium? Tap that. And now I've got compression on top. How cool is that? And what else can I do? How about a grain noise medium? Let's add that. Tap that. Now to produce my style of like grain and noise, which looks kind of cool. Let me double click so we can see real quick. Okay, so as you can see, we have a little bit of noise off and on. Cool. And so we've already created a look, a final look from this right out of camera, or we finished our clean edit anyway. And now we have like a blue toned look. All right, cool. If we like that, we can do a couple of things. We can save it and keep it, of course. We can export. We can use the same exact layers on another image of the same set. We can do so many different things. We can also, if you want, group it all and turn it off and then start over and do some other grades and see if you like that better. In this case, I'm going to delete it. And let's start a different direction. How about we go for this orange? Let's go for obsidian. Even though it's just named obsidian and something called element. Okay, kind of cool. Let's do a shadow crusher medium. What's that going to do for me? Okay, all right. I don't mind that so much, but I'm going to change the opacity of that. And I'm going to do the highlight popper. Cool, got a highlight pop. Going to tone down the over there. There we go. Cool, cool. And then I can put maybe a compressor on top of everything. Boom, and I have a look. You see how that works? These are all tools you can set up manually, but by allowing you to quickly stack, the actions are smart enough to stack on top of each other. You can change the order in case obsidian might look different or better on top of element. You never know. And on the stacking thing, a couple of pieces of advice that I've noticed in working with these for months. You don't really need 9 of these things stacked. Eventually, it starts to be like Bob Ross. You start mud mixing. It just turns into one big hazy tone after a while, especially the way curves work. So it's a better idea to stack 1 or 2, maybe 3, and then change the opacities back and forth. And if you change the opacity of the folder itself, then the entire look that it creates inside the folder is changed in opacity. But if you open it and choose, for example, the RGB curves, you can change the opacity of just those and leave the other elements, which include like a contrast boosting or minimizing, saturation boosting specifically for that look, etc., etc. It's just a way of exploring color quickly. So again, I can just delete all those. And let's say I want to do like a purple thing. I'm going to start with one of these glam, which there's a video about the glam ones real quick, but that you can watch. But real quick, I'll tell you that the glam ones are just, they kind of do a base grade that I like to do for a lot of my images. A lot of people would call glam, and they're just variations of it. So it kind of gives a warmth, kind of glammy look to your shot. So there's that. Let's go for this one called Helios. And now we have a nice cool vibe there. I don't mind that so much. And then we can come up here and like, okay, how about we soften the shadows in a medium way, and then we're going to do force linear contrast. You put that up, it's going to force the linear contrast, and then I can scale it back in opacity, maybe at 35%, etc. And I went from this to this. So ColorLogic doesn't just build color washes, it builds looks and contrasts and highlights and things of that nature, right? All kinds of different ways that you can create looks quick. So for example, I can add grain noise heavy right now. Let that process. This is the way I like to make grain and noise, right? Let that process. And then boom, we have a cool look. All right. And now we have a grain look. It's hard to see, of course, on the video. I understand that. But we went from that to that, and we've created a vibe and a look. And on top of that, there is also another one that, I don't know. Actually, I don't like the grain on this one. I don't know that we're going to use it on this shot necessarily. Oops. But we have another one too that's a little bit more raster rendering. In other words, this one called right here, highlight glow. If you tap that, it's going to create a glow based on the highlights of the image. And then you can modify it. So the initial glow you get might not be exactly what you want like that, but you can modify it. You can also give it a slight toning, which I recommend doing, mostly either for effect because you like the color tone of the way you're going to grade and tone the light glow, or just to counteract the main color grade. So you hit that, you hit OK. It's going to start at around 50% opacity. You see what's happening there. Now, if I double click on photo filter on the smart filter of the highlight glow, I can change that color. So again, let's say I want to make it a cooling filter, but a different vibe. Now let's warm it up. Give it a slight warmth. There we go. And then if I go to Gaussian blur, pretty straightforward. You can decide how much you want to blur it. So maybe like a 300, that scales it back a little bit. And then the threshold is really important because this is where you determine where the highlights go. So you can move that to the right and scale back the highlights a little bit. How much you're going to glow anyway, right? This is just the range. Then you hit OK, and it reprocesses the glow. And now we have off, and we have on. And then I can change that instead of 50%. How about a 25%? Something like that. Once you have that glow, you can make actually 20. You can make some other choices too. If you want to glow after the grade, cool, leave it there. If not, you can move it down below the grade. And sometimes that makes a little bit of a difference because of the way it processes that glow. Because the color grade can kind of blend in that glow a little bit. And sometimes you put it on top or anywhere else that you feel makes sense to you. So now I went again from this to that just by stacking these automatic color grade actions as well as the helper actions, right? So here again, I can delete all of that and start over. How about we go for solstice, linear, pulse wave. Ooh, that got strong quick. All right, let's go see what's going on with pulse wave. Let's turn that one down. Maybe like a 25, maybe a 30. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and look at our helper actions here. How about we go for shadow softener heavy? There you go. It's going to really soften things up. And then maybe we'll put a little bit of noise. Why not? Give that a second to process. Maybe a compressor, a soft compressor overall. And then don't get me wrong. This is to get you either all the way there or close. And then you can add manual things too. So like maybe underneath the noise, I can add levels if I really want to. Put it to luminosity blending mode. And then I can add some dark on the side and maybe a little bit of highlight. There we go. Cool. And I went from this to this. You see, I'm not just making random washes of green or orange. I'm creating grades using RGB curves. And this is the fastest way to work with ColorLogic, but it's not the only way. There's a lot of other detailed things you can do, either with one look that you can modify heavily. You can create your own looks, etc. This is just the fast way to stack the looks in a hurry and start finding inspiration. So again, I'm going to do one more real fast for you just to see what happens. We're going to glam it a little bit. We're going to go to feedback. We're going to go to anthem, and we're going to go to paramount. We have all these looks. They're super strong. So let's put that one like maybe 30. Maybe that one also 30. Put that one at 20. 25. Excellent. And let's go to our helper actions. Maybe we can pop the highlights a bit. There we go. Change the opacity of that just a little bit. And then let's go ahead and compress medium. And there we go. Now we have a look from there to there. Creating looks. Yeah, that one's a little bit similar to the last one, but you get the idea. We can also explore just green, dynamo, prime, lo-fi, and pitch. Why not? All very, very strong, but we can change the opacity 20, 20, 30, and like 40. There we go. We have a beautiful green look that we can play with. Again, I don't think you need 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of these stacked up, but you never know what you can find. It can look really cool. Most of the time, 2 or 3 is going to be good, and then you can just open the folder and modify the different settings of each look. That's the basics, easiest way of ColorLogic working for you to find looks right now very, very quickly. And again, if you have all these layers up, I'm just going to click some random ones right now. If you have all of these layers up and you're doing various things with them, give that a second to process. And then you figure out, oh, okay, I like this, and I like that, and I like that. There you go, cool. Now, these layers, you can just drag and drop them to another image of the same set, and you got the exact same look. That's the beauty of it. You can keep exploring and finding different looks. So again, that's ColorLogic when it comes to stacking looks very, very quickly using the main actions for the color grades as well as the helper actions on top. And try it. Try actions on button mode. I think you'll really, really like that when it comes to exploring color.